My name is Sadie Rivera. I'm 34 years old, and until one random Wednesday afternoon, I thought I was in a stable, long-term relationship with a man I trusted. The post that detonated my life didn't arrive with drama or warning. It appeared quietly, wedged between a sponsored ad and a coworker's vacation photo, while I was sitting in a hotel ballroom in Chicago, pretending to listen to a painfully dull presentation on cybersecurity compliance. It was the final session of a 3-day conference for my software firm, the kind where everyone nods politely, eyes glazed over, thumbs moving in perfect synchronization as they scroll their phones. That's when I saw it. A photo of Ethan, my boyfriend of 3 years. He was on a rooftop bar back home, leaning casually against a glass railing, city lights glowing behind him. He was wearing a crisp linen shirt I didn't recognize, new, intentional. A cocktail sat in his hand. He was laughing, head tilted slightly, surrounded by friends. The photo itself was harmless, attractive even, confident. It was the caption that gutted me. The nights are getting longer, and so is my list of requirements. Taking applications. Single for the summer. Hashtag single season. I read it once, then again. I zoomed in on his face, searching for something, some hint that this was satire, an inside joke, a poorly executed attempt at humor that I was simply too far away to understand. There was nothing, just a public declaration that the man I lived with, the man who slept beside me, the man whose laundry was still in our dryer, was announcing his availability to the internet. While I was 3 states away working, a strange thing happened then. I didn't cry. I didn't feel that hot rush of anger people talk about, the kind that blurs vision and makes your hands shake. Instead, a precise, icy calm settled into my chest. The same feeling I get at work when a system crashes and everyone around me is panicking. When emotions become noise and all I can see is the flaw, the vulnerability, the point of failure. Ethan's post wasn't a joke. It was a breach. And breaches don't get emotional responses, they get fixed. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I acted. His post was already filling up with comments. Fire emojis, laughing faces, men and women congratulating him on his freedom. I typed a single line beneath it. Application denied. Then I hit post. Next, I went to my own profile. For 3 years, my status had read, in a relationship with Ethan Cole. I clicked edit, scrolled, selected single, saved. But I wasn't finished. Ethan lived for narrative, for optics, for how things looked. I already knew how this would go if I stayed silent. He'd spin it, paint me as the jealous girlfriend who couldn't take a joke, the uptight woman threatened by a little attention. I wasn't going to give him that chance. I posted a photo from my first night in Chicago, a professional dinner with colleagues. I looked calm, focused, unaware. My caption was simple: wrapping up a great conference in Chicago. Big projects ahead. Also starting a new chapter personally. Funny how sometimes you don't realize you're single until social media tells you. Here's to a summer of clarity. Then came the final move. I tagged his mother, Margaret Cole, a deeply traditional woman who believed appearances were sacred. Church committees, handwritten thank you notes, the unwavering belief that her son was in a respectable, committed relationship with a nice woman. I put my phone face down on the hotel nightstand. The speaker was still droning on about firewalls. It took less than 5 minutes. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Texts, calls, voicemails stacking up like missed alarms. I didn't pick up. When I finally looked, Ethan's post was gone. Deleted. Vanished. But it didn't matter. The screenshot was already saved. He wanted to be single for the summer. I had just processed his application. Effective immediately. And he was about to learn he wasn't going to like the terms. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was crying into a hotel pillow or spiraling through memories. Those emotions would come later, like bruises you don't feel until the adrenaline fades. I didn't sleep because my mind was doing what it always does when something breaks. Running scenarios, identifying risk, eliminating variables. Ethan had made one fatal mistake. He thought the battlefield was social media. But the real battlefield was my life, my house, my future, my peace. And I owned the terrain. By sunrise, my phone had accumulated 27 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, and more texts than I bothered to count. I scanned a few, just enough to confirm what I already knew. Ethan wasn't sorry. He was scared. His messages weren't, "Sadie, I hurt you," or "I disrespected us." They were, "Take that down. Why would you do that to me? My mom is freaking out. You're making me look crazy. It was a joke. Answer your phone." A joke. Right. If it was a joke, why delete it the second the consequences touched him? I flew home the next day. I didn't warn him. I didn't give him the chance to rehearse a speech or stage a tearful apology in the driveway. I simply got on the plane, put in my headphones, and stared out the window as the clouds passed like blank pages. When I landed, I turned my phone off completely. I knew Ethan would be at the house, waiting like a spider in a corner, ready to ambush me the second I walked in. He'd weaponize emotion, turn it into confusion, pull me into an argument where I'd have to defend my right to feel betrayed. I wasn't walking into that blind. So I made 2 stops before I went home. The first stop was a locksmith. The guy behind the counter was in his late 50s with tired eyes and hands stained with metal dust. I told him I needed new locks, high security. He didn't ask questions. People usually don't. He just nodded like he'd seen every kind of heartbreak that ends in new keys. The second stop was my lawyer, because as cold as Ethan's post was, I wasn't going to respond with reckless heat. If I was ending this, I was ending it clean. Legally clean. My attorney, Denise Marlowe, listened without interrupting as I explained everything. Chicago, the post, the caption, the deletion, the frantic calls, the fact that Ethan and I were not married, but had been living together for 2 years in a home only my name was on. Denise's face didn't change. She just clicked her pen and asked the questions that mattered. Does he contribute to the mortgage? No. Is his name on the deed? No. Any written lease agreement? No. She leaned back, calm as stone. Then he's effectively a tenant at will. You can terminate the arrangement with proper notice. And given the circumstances, public humiliation, documented proof of relationship disruption, you have more than enough justification to request he leave. There it was. Not revenge, not drama. Procedure. Denise drafted everything I needed in a neat folder. Dates, deadlines, the language that held weight. As I walked out of her office, I felt a strange clarity, like I'd stepped out of fog. People think heartbreak is chaos. But sometimes heartbreak is the moment you realize you've been living in a house with a crack in the foundation, and you finally stop pretending it won't collapse. It was almost 6 when I pulled into my driveway. Ethan's car was there. Of course it was. I parked, stepped out, and stood for a moment in the quiet. My own front yard looked unfamiliar, like I was approaching someone else's life. Then the front door flew open. Ethan stood there like a storm. His face was blotchy, his eyes red-rimmed, his hair messy, like he'd been running his hands through it for 24 hours straight. "Where the hell have you been?" he shouted. His voice cracked at the end, and for half a second the sound almost tugged at something in me. "Almost. I've been calling you," he said, stepping onto the porch. "You humiliated me. My mom, Sadie, my mom is having a meltdown because of you." I walked past him without answering, rolling my suitcase over the threshold like I was checking into a hotel. That seemed to stun him more than any scream could have. He followed me inside, furious and desperate in the same breath. "You can't just ignore me like I'm nothing," he snapped. I set my suitcase upright in the entryway and calmly removed my keys from my pocket. Then I turned to face him. "Did she not like my post?" I asked, voice even. His mouth fell open. You're seriously doing this?" he said. "Sadie, it was a joke. It was for engagement. Everyone does those stupid captions." "Everyone does?" I repeated soft. He paced like a trapped animal. "Yes, my friends were doing it. It was a trend. Like satire. Like, oh, haha, I'm single. It's not literal." "Then why delete it?" He froze. His eyes flickered away. "Because you made it weird," he said quickly. "You commented. You tagged my mom. That's psycho behavior, Sadie. That's vindictive." I stared at him. Not angry, not emotional. Just observing. "You posted you were taking applications," I said, "while you were still living in my home, still sleeping in my bed, still letting me believe we were building something real." He swallowed. His throat bobbed like guilt trying to climb out. "You're twisting it," he said, voice rising. "You always do this. You always overanalyze and turn everything into some moral trial." It was one caption. "One caption," I echoed. I walked into the living room and set the folder Denise gave me on the coffee table. The paper landed with a quiet thud. Ethan's eyes tracked it. "What's that?" he asked, suspicious. I didn't answer right away, because this next part mattered. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd defended to my friends, the man I'd trusted with my routines, my home, my soft places, and I realized something that made my stomach go cold all over again. Ethan genuinely believed this was a fight. A dramatic, messy fight where I'd cry. He'd apologize just enough to soothe me, and then we'd return to normal. He believed consequences were temporary. He had no concept of permanent. "No, Ethan," I said quietly. "You made yourself look like a fool. You didn't empower yourself. You disrespected me for attention. His eyes narrowed. I didn't disrespect you. You announced to the world you were available, I said. The only thing I did was believe you. His face tightened. I'm not available, he insisted, voice shaking now. I love you. I was being stupid. Don't throw away 3 years over a caption. I let a beat of silence pass. Then I said, I'm not throwing it away. I nodded toward the folder. You did. He stared at it like it might bite him. Then he stepped forward and snatched it up. His eyes moved across the first page. His breathing changed, shorter, sharper. What is this? He demanded. A termination notice, I said. You have until Sunday at 5:00 p.m. to move your belongings out of my house. His head snapped up. You can't kick me out. Yes, I said calmly, I can. His hands trembled as he flipped pages like he could find a loophole in ink. I live here, he said. I have rights. You have things, I corrected, and you have a deadline. His face shifted from rage to panic so fast it was almost frightening. Sadie, this is insane, he said. You're being dramatic. You're doing this because you're embarrassed. I took a slow breath. No, I said. I'm doing this because you showed me who you are when you think nobody can hold you accountable. He stepped closer, voice dropping like he was trying a new tactic. Okay, he said. Okay, fine. I messed up. But you tagging my mom? That's cruel. That's not love. I met his gaze. Love doesn't post single for the summer while your girlfriend is out of town working, I said. That hit him. Not because he felt bad, because he had no comeback. For a moment, his eyes went glassy, and I thought, maybe now he'll actually apologize. Instead, he said, Lila thinks you're doing this to punish me. There it was. The name slipped out like an accident, but it wasn't. It was a test, a needle to see if I'd flinch. Lila, his ex-girlfriend. The woman he claimed was in the past, not relevant, totally over him. My stomach didn't drop, my face didn't change. But inside, a new file opened in my mind. So she's involved. How does Lila know anything about this? I asked, voice still soft. Ethan blinked, too fast. She just saw it online, he stammered. Everyone saw it online, Sadie. I nodded slowly, like I accepted that explanation. But I didn't, because Ethan had said Lila thinks, not Lila saw. And that meant she hadn't just witnessed the fallout. She'd been in his ear, guiding him, poisoning the story. The argument escalated after that. Ethan shouting, bargaining, accusing me of cruelty, of control, of being too intense. He swore he'd fix it. He swore he'd never do it again. But in the entire hour he raged through my living room, he never said one clean sentence. I'm sorry I did it. He wasn't sorry. He was furious that I refused to absorb the humiliation quietly. And as he stormed off toward the guest room, where I'd already moved his clothes, my phone buzzed for the first time since I turned it back on. A new notification. A message request. From a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Margaret Cole. Ethan's mother. And before I even opened it, my gut told me, this wasn't over. Not even close. Margaret's message sat on my screen like a live wire. I didn't open it right away. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because I already knew the tone. Women like Margaret Cole didn't text impulsively. They wrote carefully, with intention, with the weight of disappointment folded neatly between polite words. I set my phone down and let Ethan finish his performance. He paced the hallway, slammed drawers, muttered under his breath. Every so often, he'd throw out another line. Half accusation, half plea. You're acting like I cheated. You're blowing this way out of proportion. People online are laughing at me, Sadie. That one almost made me smile. People online. The same crowd he'd courted for validation less than 48 hours ago. Now that the attention burned instead of warmed, it was suddenly my fault. I retreated into my office and closed the door, not to hide, but to contain him. There was something feral about the way he kept trying to pull me back into the chaos, like if he could just get me emotional enough, I'd lose my footing. I didn't. I opened Margaret's message. Sadie, I hope you're safe. I don't fully understand what's happening, but Ethan is extremely upset. I saw the post. I'm very disappointed. I would appreciate a chance to speak when you're ready. Margaret. No accusations, no excuses. Just disappointment. That told me everything. I replied simply, I'm safe. I'll call you tomorrow. That night, Ethan slept in the guest room. Or rather, he didn't sleep. He drank. I could hear the clink of bottles, the scrape of the fridge opening and closing, the restless pacing. At some point around midnight, I heard him on the phone. I didn't think she'd actually kick me out, he said, voice slurred and bitter. A pause. No, Lila, she's not being reasonable. Another pause. She's doing this to punish me. So I hadn't imagined it. Lila wasn't just a ghost. She was a whisper in the background, feeding his sense of injustice, validating his entitlement. The same woman who'd once told him he was too special to be tied down. The same woman who'd left him and then resurfaced whenever he started building something real. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since Chicago, I felt something crack. Not sadness, relief. Because now I understood. Ethan hadn't just disrespected me on impulse. He'd done it with backup. The next morning, I called Margaret. She answered on the first ring. "Sadie," she said, voice tight. "Thank you for calling." "I wanted to be clear," I said. "I'm not asking you to take sides." She sighed. "I've already seen enough to know something went wrong," I explained calmly. The post, the caption, the timing, the fact that Ethan never once apologized for doing it, only for how it made him look. Margaret was quiet for a long time. "When his father and I raised him," she finally said, "we taught him that character is what you do when no one's watching." I swallowed. "He forgot that," she's added softly. "Or maybe he never learned it as well as I thought." That was the moment Ethan lost the last place he could hide. Because when a mother like Margaret stops defending you, the ground disappears. By afternoon, the fallout spread. Mutual friends started reaching out. Not to me, but to each other. Screenshots circulated. Someone reposted Ethan's original caption with my comment still attached. Application denied began appearing everywhere. Jokes, memes, side comments. Ethan tried to fight back. He posted a vague story about toxic relationships and being punished for humor. He framed himself as misunderstood, claimed he was being attacked for embracing independence. The response was brutal. "Didn't you have a girlfriend when you posted that? Independence doesn't mean disrespect. You wanted to be single. Why are you mad now?" Within hours, the story disappeared. So did his confidence. By Friday, Ethan barely left the guest room. His phone stayed glued to his hand, refreshing feeds that no longer loved him back. Margaret came by that evening, alone. She didn't yell. She didn't lecture. She stood in my kitchen, eyes tired, hands folded. "I told him he needs to leave," she said quietly. "Not just your house. He needs to leave this version of himself." I nodded. "He's moving back home," she added, "at least for now." When she left, Ethan didn't look at me. He just stared at the wall, hollowed out. The man who thought he controlled the narrative was now trapped inside it. And Sunday was coming. By Sunday afternoon, the house felt lighter. Not empty, lighter, like something toxic had finally been aired out. Ethan's parents arrived with a rented van just before 4. His father stayed mostly silent, eyes fixed on the driveway, carrying boxes like pennants. Margaret hugged me briefly, whispered, "I'm sorry," and meant it in a way that didn't ask for forgiveness, only acknowledgement. Ethan avoided eye contact as they loaded his things. No grand speech, no final plea, just tight shoulders and clenched teeth like he was trying to memorize the shape of the life he'd lost without admitting it was gone. At 4:57 p.m., he stood by the door. "So that's it?" he asked, voice thin. 3 years, over a post." I didn't rise to it. "It wasn't the post," I said. "It was the choice." He scoffed, the sound brittle. "What about Greece?" Ah, there it was. The trip, 3 weeks, island hopping, non-refundable, the future he'd already spent in his head. "I've handled it," I said. Hope flashed, small and stupid. He smiled like he thought I'd fold, like he thought I'd cancel, or worse, invite him back in. He didn't know I'd already invited someone else. At 5 p.m. exactly, the van pulled away. I changed the locks that night. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane to Greece with my best friend Nora. No performative outfits, no stage smiles, no obsession with angles or captions, just sun, salt, laughter, and the kind of silence that heals instead of accuses. We hiked cliffs in Santorini, sailed between islands, ate food we didn't photograph first. I posted once every few days, nothing flashy, just moments, proof of life. Grateful for new beginnings. Some things end so better things can start. Back home, Ethan watched. Friends told me later. He watched as the trip he thought was his reward unfolded without him, as the summer he announced slipped through his fingers and became mine. His single season collapsed into his childhood bedroom. Failed plans, canceled trips, a reality that didn't applaud him for existing. He tried once, messaged me from a burner account. "We should talk." I didn't reply, because some conversations are only meant to happen once, and we'd already had ours. 6 months have passed since that Wednesday in Chicago. I'm sitting on my back porch now, watching the sun dip low enough to set the sky on fire. The air is quiet in the way it only gets when nothing is waiting to explode. Peace, I've learned, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself, it just stays. The Greece trip changed something fundamental in me, not because of where I went, but because of who I wasn't with. I laughed without checking reflections. I slept without anxiety. I realized how much emotional labor I'd been doing to maintain a relationship that only worked when I made myself smaller. When I came home, the house finally felt like mine. Not ours, mine. The story of Ethan's single for the summer post became a quiet legend among our mutual friends. Not gossip, more like a cautionary tale, the kind people reference when they talk about self-sabotage disguised as confidence. His attempt to reclaim the narrative failed completely. He tried rebranding himself online, vague posts about healing, independence, toxic exes. The comments never let him forget how it started. Eventually, he stopped posting altogether. The last I heard, he's working an entry-level job his father helped him get. Nothing wrong with honest work, except Ethan always believed he was meant for more without doing more. Margaret sent me a handwritten card 2 months ago. She apologized, not for herself, but for not seeing her son clearly sooner. She said she hoped I was happy. I didn't respond, but I appreciated it. I ran into Ethan once after that. A grocery store, Saturday morning. Bright fluorescent lights flattening everything, including him. He was in the checkout line ahead of me, holding a sad microwave dinner and a bottle of cheap wine. No confidence, no performance. Just a tired man who'd mistaken attention for worth. He glanced back, recognition flashing briefly in his eyes, followed by something like shame. He turned away immediately. I didn't say a word. I paid for my groceries and left. Because there was nothing left to say. The most satisfying part of all this wasn't revenge. It was alignment. Ethan believed life was a brand. That relationships were flexible, negotiable, performative. That respect could be bent for applause. He was wrong. I didn't destroy him. I simply believed him when he said he was single, and I enforced real-world consequences on a digital lie. So yes, I denied his application. To disrespect, to entitlement, to using my life as a backdrop for his ego. Denied. And from the looks of it, his summer never ended. Mine is just getting started.